When I refereed this weekend, there's one coach in particular who stood out for his positive reinforcement to players. He continually said, next play, next play, next play. So if a player made a mistake, or if a player looked towards a bench, so on and so forth, he was always at next play, to get players to focus on what they can do now. If you've made a mistake, that's in the past. There's nothing you can do about it. So there's no sense dwelling on it or sulking or feeling upset. The only thing you can do is change what happens next. So focus on what you can do and what's the next best thing that you can do. And he was constantly saying this over and over and over again. And compared to the rest of the coaches, some of whom were great, some of whom weren't, he really stood out to me for just that focus on. I'm not going to yell at you. I'm not going to criticize that mistake. I'm not even going to try to explain what went wrong or give you some informative feedback or do anything that could be positive in certain situations. I'm just going to get you focused on the next play. If it's something that we need to discuss or teach or instruct, we can do that at halftime or if you sub out or at practice, at our next practice. But right now, in the moment, keep focused on the game and keep focused on what's happening now, not what just happened. And when I think about it, a lot of the great soccer managers tend to have notebooks and take a lot of notes during games. And part of that is because a soccer game is so long, and you can't possibly stand and instruct the entire game, although some coaches attempt to at the youth levels. And it is a different environment, certainly than basketball, especially the distance that players are from the coach makes it a little bit more difficult to communicate with players in the middle of a game, whereas basketball coaches can easily call a player over at a dead ball, or players are never more than 20 or 30 feet away from a coach, so it's relatively easy to get a player's attention if you need to give them some information or whatever. But I think that idea of keeping notes during a game, as opposed to yelling out those instructions whenever there's something that you see, because it's not always going to be useful for a player to think about a mistake that they just made, how they would correct it in the future, instead of just playing in the moment and playing the next play. So instead, take some notes, and that can inform maybe your halftime discussion, your post-game discussion, or your next practice in terms of what went right, what went wrong. This happened at this minute. It was this situation, and we did this. Next time, let's set this up. Let's see what we could do better. But in the moment, constantly saying next play is a good idea, because we want players to stay in the moment, to stay focused on what's going on during the game, and not allow their mind to drift towards a previous mistake or something else, or even towards trying to get feedback from a coach. So I think he really stood out because he said it so often during the game. Probably maybe 20 or 30 times he told a player, next play, next play, next play, and they really kept their focus. And it's one of the better teams in the country, so that probably makes it easier to be a little bit more relaxed as a coach when you have that much talent. But there's also something for the other argument that there's that much talent because of the way that the coach coaches and how he treats the players and how he allows them to play, and he's not over instructing and he's not negative with feedback during games. Instead, he's allowing them to play, taking some notes, and then discussing what needs to be changed, or at halftime and then at the end of the game, to prepare for the next opponent. So next play is a great instruction. I know the sports psychology professor at Cal State Fullerton, talks about flushing a mistake and puts a porcelain toilet in the Cal State Fullerton baseball dugout. So same idea, but next play is easier, I think, to really get those players focused on, forget what just happened, focus on the next play. We can worry about whatever mistakes happened at a later time if we need to instruct or try to correct something.